Intelligence some radio Yakopium ewo United States of America USA. Some court case be akoso between US Federal Appeals Court versus Donald Trump over the other two China, Canada, any other countries also no. And then enkomo ewo honom aha authentic plus studio. Make sure so be like you subscribe you and share. I'm a fufu so enya bi ahwe. Enti se mo beka Donald Trump eba abamu first no. The first few 3 months no or the impose tariffs added to China, Canada, and some other countries. So I'm say those countries eba bontin ebe kasaya e company say it's too much. But except China for or man bontin amekasa omude muchemu say obujine mutakri obutanti isu abrobo meeting omude anya ade ombe back it up even though said Donald Trump I impose tariffs at the actual market space. No, say dia omo betwe asan. Etianam so much as na affect am for bebre because of the tariffs na Donald Trump. I dey too so no. Eti for all this one no na asem no e wo court ache say omo pe kwan bi so it may use those tariffs no atoso. Etiende on ache say US Appeals Court e dey say omo dey asem no court omo ko di ye no. First of all, omo hwehwe mu no yes say powers are Donald Trump as president under a International Emergency Economic Powers Act at the Somo Trinitiawa, our friend IEEPA. Not to say Embra or war and I say the powers are or war under those acts no ICD. It's therefore those tariffs not to say or the two China and Canada so no illegal and a secondly crampono. International Emergency Economic Powers Act no kwampono. It doesn't give Donald Trump the right and I say they are granted Donald Trump the permission to act and I say they are to impose and I say to take those actions. Those powers no it belongs to the Congress na enye Donald Trump. Is in the courts excellency ebu asem no catch Donald Trump said those tariffs no or pronouncing as illegal. Video no.
Just moments ago, we got word from a U.S. appeals court. This is breaking. The court found the president's global tariffs were found to be illegal. The court finding Trump exceeded his authority in imposing the tariffs, upholding an earlier ruling by the Court of International Trade that ruled Trump wrongfully invoked an emergency law to issue the tariffs. This is a major development. It's the emergency that the court is ruling on here.
That's right. And that was always suspect. And, you know, reading the statute, it was very, very hard to imagine that the court would support a declaration of an emergency. You know, he talked about an emergency for things like the the trade deficit, for instance. But yet that has been going on for decades and decades, hardly constituting an emergency. So it was always an uphill battle for the administration. They will certainly appeal. And of course, this is part of what the administration is going to have to contend with, and consumers and businesses around the world, countries around the world, this uncertainty as it pertains to tariffs. This is what the president took on when he announced this regime, and we'll have to see what the courts say as this moves forward.
Hey, Brian, so just to catch everybody up on where this case stood, this is the consolidated case that the Court of International Trade had back in the spring, found that most of these tariffs imposed for national security reasons or for reasons of international economic emergency, I should say, to be more specific, were not legal. This is the first round of appeals. This case is upholding that ruling. They're saying that they agree with the initial court. This is the appeals court saying they agree with the Court of International Trade that because this statute does not say that this is an international emergency, that because of this international emergency, he should be allowed to impose tariffs via executive order. That's why they're upholding the ruling. Now, a couple crucial points on where we go from here, Brian. One is that this will all but certainly go to the Supreme Court. So we know that will be the next step. We knew this court was listening to this on an expedited basis so that it could get to the Supreme Court even faster, potentially get a ruling sometime in the spring or summer. What we don't know right now that is crucial is what happens to the tariffs in the meantime. Again, this is the vast majority of all of the tariffs the president has imposed so far were imposed under this IEEPA statute. So now the appeals court agreeing he doesn't have the authority to use it in that way. But this court appears to be sending the decision on whether a universal injunction should go in place to stop the government from collecting the tariffs. They appear to be sending that back to the Court of International Trade to decide. So based on my initial read of this ruling, and again, it's quite long, we're still going through it, it seems like the status of the tariffs at the moment is still in limbo. Just one other thing I would flag, Brian, is just earlier today, administration officials had filed a brief in this case to argue that they needed to keep collecting the tariffs, that otherwise it would put them on sort of shaky diplomatic ground. They would be losing out on important revenue, a number of arguments laid out by different administration officials. So they very much want to keep these tariffs in place while we wait for the Supreme Court to hear the case. That's what we just don't know yet, Brian.
Yeah. It's after say who videos any news ebe circulating na say Donald Trump about bonten ebe responding to those courts issue na say ebe to bonten on to chim say in fact now we are very partisan pa na say appeals court for no na in fact so mo koso na mo yes na it is going to cause a disaster in the United States of America and sure it is going to cost financial loss to the state. A very big disaster at the United States of America. But Donald Trump esa kwaso eka say those tariffs component say courts ebuase illegal is still in effect until October. October no omesa go back to court na asem no baby I was somebody to no ometimi e dia to.
Breaking at this hour, President Trump responded to our lead story that an appellate court ruled that most of his tariffs are illegal. That ruling just about within the hour. He just posted seconds ago. All tariffs are still in effect. Today, a highly partisan appeals court incorrectly said that our tariffs should be removed, but they know the United States of America will win in the end. If these tariffs ever went away, it would be a total disaster for the country. It would make us financially weak, and we have to be strong. The USA will no longer tolerate enormous trade deficits and unfair tariffs and non-tariff trade barriers imposed by other countries, friend or foe, that undermine our manufacturers, farmers, and everyone else. If allowed to stand, this decision would literally destroy the United States of America. At the start of this Labor Day weekend, we should all remember that tariffs are the best tool to help our workers and support companies that produce great made-in-America products. For many years, tariffs were allowed to be used against us by our uncaring and unwise politicians. Now, with the help of the United States Supreme Court, we will use them to the benefit of our nation and make America rich, strong, and powerful again. Thank you for your attention to this matter again. The President of the United States just seconds ago.
Every share bit review comment or comment section and say, aha, authentic plus studio. Make sure so like you best subscribe. We are now share. I'm a full phone so any be.